Thanks so much, Marie. And as Marie said earlier, for those that joined maybe a bit later, I'll take the presentation in English, but questions, comments, please come with Swedish. That works just fine. Yeah, so this project is quite different to the project you just heard about, Corrales. So rather than being a huge multi-year, multi-million budget, we're working with a much smaller budget over the course of just a little over a year. And in this project, the starting point is Marie mentioned, is water resources and water symbiosis. And we're really at the very beginning of just kind of exploring what this could mean in each communa. And then because we're working with industrial actors, kind of our starting point is from the perspective of how we can reuse water that's being produced at Arla in their industrial processes. So I'll talk more about that, but that's a bit of the overview. And in the project, it may be short timeline and tight timeline and tight budget, but we still have kind of two different aspects that we're working with. So beyond the role of industrial symbiosis for solving today's challenges, we're also thinking about in talking about this in the two different cases about the role of water resources and water symbiosis for securing drinking water resources in the future as well. And we're working at a very local level, so we're very much in touch with the local actors and industrial actors, and also the municipalities in each of these cases. So the project, when it was written, the two goals, and this kind of also reflects a bit this desire to work both with the present challenges, but also having an eye towards future developments, is to look at the condensate that's being produced from Arla when they're producing milk powder in various amounts in both Vimmerby and Visby, and then do a deeper analysis of some different alternatives about how this water could be used and contribute to securing drinking water supply. At the same time, though, we're very interested in the process. This is another key aspect of this project, is how can we work in a process with local actors? What kind of learnings can we take with us from this project that could be interesting for other municipalities, where at a local level there's of course always different contextual factors to take in. So what are some of the general process learnings that we get when we're starting to look at symbiosis, in particular water resources and symbiosis at this scale? So those are our two main points and things that we'll be delivering along the way. And in each case, this is just a bit of an overview of the actors. So Arla, with the condensate, we're looking and working together with in both Visby and Vimmerby, the other industrial actors, but also other water users from the public sector. And this, in both cases, we've brought in some additional expertise. So over here on the right side, you see SGU and IUC Kalmar, and they've been involved in both cases. Is actually one of the trade-offs that we've had to make in the process, and an initial learning that we really hope to get both cases together. So actors from both cases working together on some workshops and so on. But physically, that's been challenging because they're quite spread apart. So we've ended up working mostly in individual cases so far, but we're working towards in parallel processes that are more or less the same activities towards a full group meeting later this spring. So a little bit of background about each case. What makes them similar is that they both have their drinking water supply from groundwater, which is maybe different to a lot of areas in Sweden. Not so uncommon for the Danes, where I did my PhD, but here in Sweden, groundwater-based water supplies is not so common. The the two cases are also similar in that we talk about actors, so both of them have Arla as a net importer of water. So because they're importing milk and then processing it to produce this condensate, that's kind of an interesting aspect and what makes both of these cases interesting to look at the same time. And again, some similarities between the cases is a lot of uncertainty about the future. What will the future population development look like? What increased demands will there be on the water aquifers because of this? What kind of seasonal variations in water demand will we have? Maybe more pronounced in Visby at the moment than in Vimmerby, but it certainly exists. How could that match with the production of this condensate water if we manage to find a fitting alternative use for the water? And of course, the impact of climate change on these water resources, groundwater aquifers. We know in Vimmerby already this last summer, not in the specific area where we're working, but in other areas of the commune, there was a need to stop the use of some of their waterworks, where groundwater resources were pushed to their limits in extremely warm and dry periods. So I think these are not necessarily extremely long-term considerations, but more urgent in the near to midterm considerations that should be taken in. And we've discussed that at length with the two different within the two different cases with the different actors. And just to say this map to explain it, so we've in an early stage here, we've done a little bit of mapping out of where the different water users are and their role respective the other industries. So we have the industries I showed in the previous slide that we're working together with closely, but then we have also reached out to various degrees to some of these other actors to learn a little bit more about their water use and water requirements. Yes, and then same situation, or much of the similar situation here in Visby. What's a bit different is the total amount of water abstraction is much higher, and because Gotland is an island, and they've been it receives a lot of tourism and has for many years. They've been working with water resource limitations quite actively for a longer time. So they have desalinization plants as part of the regional and communal water supply. So that introduces some complexities around the energy prices, what it costs to produce water in this way with desalinization, for example. And yeah, because of this, there's quite a different, or I would say that there's different challenges and different attitudes towards water symbiosis or water resources management in general, because there has been a lot more historical need for this, a bit more urgency involved as well. Yes, and as I mentioned before, I just underline again that there is these really large seasonal changes in water use. So there's a lot of discussion about when we talk about the amount of condensate, what it can be used for. There's a lot of considerations of timing of that and storage and so on, which also brings in water quality aspects and cleaning approaches to different types of water types. So whether it's drinking water or technical water or safe water, or different kind of categories we've been working with. But you may have noticed, and I'll just flip back quickly, that the total volume of condensate from the two, so the production facilities in Vimmerby are much larger. So we're working with a huge amount of water that could be used for different purposes, whereas in Visby is a much smaller amount comparatively. So how have we worked in the project? This is where we're trying to apply some group process knowledge from research and other kinds of water resources management, where we really look at a co-production process that's very active and interactive for the participants. So rather than collecting data on our own or from the participants or actors, and then coming with our own suggestions about what we think is important or what we think their problems are. This is kind of the expert research mode that's been more or less the norm in the last few decades, but has been changing now and towards more post-normal scientific approaches or post-normal project management approaches, where we really look at co-creation as a necessary and crucial aspect of building up not only possible but desirable project outcomes. So that's how we started, with a couple of workshops in each location in Visby and Vimmerby. And there I'll describe a little bit more of that on the next slide. But that was more of an opening, very divergent, where we were exploring lots of different potentials of what this project could contribute to their needs. And now we've landed on a few concrete tasks that we're taking forward in a much more convergent. So we've been doing some prioritization, and now we're moving into deeper analyses on different alternatives with more focused working groups. And I'll describe that. So you can see we're wrapping up here in October. So we're very much in the thick of it right now, and it's ramping up a lot here in the spring with activities. So a little bit of looking back at what we have done. So in the first workshops, this is part of this divergent approach. So using nominal group technique, so that we could collect thoughts from everyone in the room and not get anchored into to one or two specific opinions. And we took learnings from the Corrales project in these different categories of symbiosis readiness, to kind of challenge the actors or participants in these workshops to think outside of the boundaries of maybe the technical possibility of a water symbiosis, but also into these that are maybe less familiar with some of them. And from that, then we mapped these out and grouped them, and kind of got into nice categories of, a lot of these were similar. Of course, there were a lot of different ones as well, but we could get some nice clear categories that we were able to structure concrete tasks for the project timeline, which you see here in this picture up along the wall. So we had the participants also, or the actors also, work with us to define what's realistic activity-wise in this project together. And then this also gave us the background to start developing some very initial high-level screening of what are some alternatives that would be desirable and technically feasible. So then in the second round of workshops, we took a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the more technical and they require a little bit more expert or technical knowledge. So we had Lars Hamburg, a colleague from RISE that is expert in water quality and in the dairy industry, come and give us a nice presentation around how regulations are changing, how, for example, our neighbors to the west over in Denmark are working with this and have worked with it, what lessons we could take from that. And we also had, for example, SGU came to talk to us a little bit about what does the groundwater resource look like, what is the geomorphology, and how does that influence potential symbiosis pathways that have been discussed thus far. For example, reinfiltration to groundwater. Is there potential for that in the local area where we have this condensate being produced? And then we also gave a few examples of analytical methods that we can use to carry out analyses and compare these alternatives with other colleagues from the unit that Rickard and I are working in. And we had a few initial results. So one of the strategies that we took with us was, rather than ask them to go and gather a whole bunch of data that we could sift through and trying to make meaning of, we rather just asked them for a little bit of high-level data that could give us a bit of an overview of the major flows, water use flows. And then that helped us to define or put forward some initial suggestions of alternatives, which we then worked together prioritize. And now in the next phase is where we're headed. So we've got these prioritized alternatives, and now we're starting to really collect a bit more data so we can do a high level initial analysis around the possibilities of these different alternatives. And we, of course, couple these to these changing legal frameworks and so on. But we're also at the same time, so we're doing in parallel a bit of a deeper analysis on some of the aspects that we know we need to focus on, that we've heard are challenges in the future that this symbiosis that might potentially be able to contribute to. So this is really around these risk and resilience for these future aspects that I mentioned for each case that are of high importance if this symbiosis is meant to have positive impacts over the long term. So that's how we're working in the project currently, and based on the discussions we've been having, these two key tasks that I've just mentioned, we've divided into working groups in each case. So because it's clear that we have a lot of knowledge still to gather around the present water budget, the present terms of how for example, a condensate could be cleaned to different, it could be processed into either technical water or maybe all the way to drinking water, what this would cost and so on. We're working with, for example, Mercatus and Advin are two consulting groups that have been with us on this that are contributing to that. And then we're at the same time, though, we've heard over and over again concerns about every time we discuss an alternative for a symbiosis, or maybe we should pipe water from Arla to the brewery, or maybe we should pipe water from Arla to a place where we can wash trucks or what have you. It's always aside from the technical aspects and economic aspects, these future possibilities. Well, what happens if the rules change and we can't use the water in this way that we're proposing? Or what happens when the water prices almost inevitably will increase from Sweden's standpoint as one of the lowest prices for delivered drinking water in the EU. So for that, we're working in a future water situation group, and there's been a lot of interest and energy around this, where some of the analytical methods we presented earlier, we're going to take in and do some dynamic modeling so we can really capture this temporal perspective and not just look at static scenarios now or 5 years in the future, but really what can happen in that development period. And then we've taken, at this point, we've already had some lessons learned, and we're in dialogue with our stakeholders or actors that we're working with about this, also what they're learning along the way. And we've had Carolina, who was asking some questions earlier, is a nice discussion partner in this, and I think we'll likely continue that to learn how can local actors, if they want to start a communa, for example, sees that there's an opportunity to look into water symbiosis. How can they start this? What's the process that they can take up, and what's feasible within a certain timeline? So we have a few lessons now, but I think we'll have a lot more to share later on in the project process as we get closer to the end. And I guess maybe one of the big ones that I would lift from this is that, of course, when we have a small project like this to really kickstart the process or working with this kind of questions, we also know that at some point the project, or we know exactly when the project will be over, and these challenges won't just disappear from an initial exploration that we're doing now. So we need to also support the actors and in building up their own networks so that they can also look at these questions and hopefully equip them also with tools, things like this matrix that is coming out of the Corrales project or some of the scenario tools that we're developing in this project, and see how those can be useful, not just when RISE is directly involved, but also later. So you can read up on our updates as we go along on ally.se. There's a link there you can visit. And then in addition, I think it's interesting, and I'll just mention that we have a parallel project that was granted late last year. This is where Lars and Charlotte, who are both also involved, around the legal frameworks that are changing and branch standards that are being established around the dairy industry or dairy sector. This is really interesting and important for our project, of course, because the water quality for water that comes in contact with food or any kind of material for human consumption like that is, of course, very different than other industrial processes. So this is going to be a really fun project to follow, and we're going to be learning a lot from them as well in the next months. So thanks so much for your attention, and hope that you have some questions. You can always contact me, either call me up or email me, or get in touch with any of my colleagues that are also working in this project together with me. Thanks so much.